Good morning, everyone. We're speaking to you today from Treaty 6 territory, and I'd like to acknowledge the Métis people who share a very deep connection with this land. And I'm very pleased to be joined by our leader, Rachel Notley. Next week is the beginning of the fall legislative session. I understand the UCP will be sharing some of their bad ideas later today. We wanted to share some of our good ones. There is another better path. Albertans know that if we had had a different result this spring, we would not have banned the construction of renewable power stations. We would not be watching a housing crisis grow worse with each passing day. And we definitely would not be trying to gamble with Alberta's pensions. To speak more about what we would be doing, I'd like to invite Rachel Notley to the microphone.
Thank you. That's so good. Well, thank you very much, Christina. And you know what? You're absolutely right. We wouldn't be wasting Albertans' time and money and heartache on a desperate gamble with their pensions, like the UCP is doing right now. Because the facts speak clearly, and so do Albertans. They don't want anyone touching their pension. But what are the Alberta NDP priorities in the meantime? That's what I want to talk to you about. We're focused on what matters to everyday Albertans, while the UCP is fixated on bickering and backward-looking and bad ideas. So we have developed an alternative throne speech, which I will now read in full. Just kidding. You know, what we have done, however, is sent out copies of it. It's up on our website, albertasfuture.ca, and I'm pleased to be sharing some highlights of it right now. Our first private members bill, we intend to use to bring legislation that would ensure that no Albertan is ever forced to pay to see their family doctor. I hope the UCP will join us in making this awful practice explicitly illegal, once and for all. We'll continue to push for the adoption of evidence-based health policies that include supporting family doctors to work in teams with other health professionals. We believe in working with doctors to ensure we have competitive pay and proper work environments. We'll call for recruiting healthcare professionals with signing bonuses and working with rural municipalities to facilitate that community integration. The government must work with health colleges as well in order to develop a clear, accelerated path for international medical professionals to provide patient care. And Alberta must fund post-secondary institutions to expand the number of spaces for future healthcare graduates, including rural training spaces. We'll also continue to demand an independent inquiry into the series of horrific errors that led hundreds of small children to be infected with dangerous E. coli bacteria in what has become the second largest outbreak of this kind in Canadian history. The Alberta NDP will continue to push for new schools in growing neighborhoods with new teachers and educational assistants to teach inside those schools. It's simply wrong that an Alberta student gets less funding than any student anywhere else in Canada. Alberta can do better, and we must invest in educating the workers and the leaders of the future. So we intend to bring in legislation to ensure that Alberta's schools report class sizes publicly and begin the work to bring those class sizes down. Alberta's official opposition will also address the cost of living from many directions, starting with planned legislation that will provide relief to Albertans stressed out by the cost of housing. The UCP cut rental supplement programs, forcing more Albertans out of their homes. We'll push to reverse these cuts, and we'll continue to call for a cap on sky-high utility rates and push for a comprehensive investigation into the unrelenting record-high increases Albertans are experiencing on their electricity bills under the failed leadership of this UCP government. We will demand efforts to lower tuition and school fees and increase student support at the same time. And when Alberta grads leave those schools, I want there to be plentiful industrial jobs available for them to take up. Our province was leading the country in renewable energy growth and investment before the UCP imposed its ban on new renewable energy products without any warning. Now, $33 billion in new investment and 24,000 good-paying jobs are at risk. So we intend to introduce a motion in the legislature demanding that such harmful and irresponsible decisions never happen again. And we'll also make a formal submission in support of renewable energy growth to the Alberta Utilities Commission. We will also continue to push further for better incentives for the expansion of carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and support a robust plan to decarbonize Alberta's electricity grid. A modern electricity grid is something the whole world is pursuing, and it happens to be the price of admission in the modern global economy. And we will not let the UCP give the Americans a 15-year head start on Alberta when it comes to the next wave of industrial development. So these are our priorities, making sure that Albertans have good jobs, good housing, good health care, reliable education, and a secure pension. I encourage people to read our whole alternative throne speech. Right there. Before we take your questions about this, I just want to address the actions of the federal government yesterday. As you all know, I am passionately committed to fighting climate change, reducing carbon emissions, and seizing the economic opportunities that this work brings. Yesterday, unfortunately, the Prime Minister moved Canada much farther away from those goals. To apply a carbon price to some regions and some fuels, but not all, is totally unacceptable. We must act together as Canadians, or this just won't work. So earlier this morning, I gave notice to the Speaker of our House that we will bring an emergency motion to call for any federal actions to be applied equitably across all Canadians, regardless of their location or the form of home heating method that they use. I hope the UCP government will support our motion as well when the House returns next week. So with that, we're happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, and we'll go to questions on the phone. Just a reminder to press *9 if you're joining us on the phone. Use the raise hand function if you're joining us via Zoom. You can say your name and your outlet at the top. We'll go to our first caller.
Oh, hi there. Catherine Gurkowski from Alberta Today, and I apologize because we missed the majority of the introduction here on Zoom. But I wonder, it sounds like this is something that you and Daniel Smith can agree on. Heading into this session, do you think there's going to be a little bit more cooperation, or are we going to see some fiery debate? What are we going to see this coming session?
Well, I think on the matter of what we saw happen yesterday with the decision taken by the federal government and various and sundry benefits offered to families in Atlantic Canada, we probably do have some agreement. And that's why we are bringing forward this motion to call on the federal government to offer up inflation relief on home heating costs equitably across the country. And I very much hope that the UCP government will take us up on this motion and that we can present a unified front from the province of Alberta to Ottawa. I think the significance of that will be compelling and persuasive. And so I'm offering an opportunity to our government to be heard in a different way on the national stage on something that is this fundamentally important. In terms of the other issues, you know, I don't know. Listen, when it comes to Canada Pension, this UCP government has been ignoring the stated wishes of the vast majority of Albertans. They have been misleading Albertans, they have been lying to Albertans, and they've been taking Albertans' money to spend in order to do that ignoring and misleading and lying. So we think the UCP should just stop this ridiculous plan, remove their hands or the threat of their hands being on the retirement security of Albertans and other Canadians, and back away from this idea completely. And so there's a great deal of difference on that matter. Albertans, the vast majority of Albertans, and the Alberta NDP official opposition caucus are completely and entirely opposed to Danielle Smith's attempt to gamble their retirement security for her own personal interests. And so if we can get them to agree that this is the wrong path, then yeah, maybe we'll see some cooperation. Otherwise, probably not.
Any follow-up, Catherine?
No, that's okay. Thanks.
We'll go to our next caller.
Hi there, Rachel. I don't know if you addressed this in your opening remarks, but as Kat indicated, we didn't hear most of them. So I was interested in the in your alternative throne speech. You talk about substantial legislation to address the housing crisis. So what exactly do you guys want to do in that bill? Can you tell me a little bit about what you're thinking?
Well, you know, we have to, I can give you some broad strokes because honestly, it's a matter that we have to give notice to our colleagues in the legislature before we get into the details of it. But essentially, we're going to be talking about different ways to control costs for Alberta families who are facing massive increases in their housing costs, such that they are becoming at risk of houselessness and homelessness. And so there's a whole range of conversations that are happening across this province about this crisis, but we do know it's a crisis. We cannot tolerate having folks try to put up with 50 to 100% rental increases, and we are seeing far too many examples of that. And so there are a range of efforts that the provincial government can engage in to reduce the pressure on Alberta families, and that's what you'll see us talking about in our private members bill. Now, as you know, as a private members bill, we are, because it's a private members bill, the scope of it is somewhat limited, so it will be paired with other policy proposals that we will also be making in association with it. But overall, we have a very comprehensive plan to help Alberta families struggling with the spiraling cost of housing in this province.
Any follow-up, Michelle?
Yeah, and I apologize for the noise. I'm in the newsroom today, and very noisy newsroom behind me. Yeah, so when you talk about broad strokes, and you also indicated that people are facing these really big rental increases, would a rent cap be on the table, like even a temporary one until more housing gets built? Maybe restrictions on Airbnbs, that kind of thing?
Well, you know what? I will just simply say to you, Michelle, stay tuned on that one. Our housing critic, Janice Irwin, has been engaging with stakeholders all across the province, and we'll be very excited when she has an opportunity to roll out that bill. But there's no question that that is an important issue that we've heard from a lot of Albertans on. And so that is definitely something that's being discussed right now.
We'll go to our next caller.
Hello, it's Dean from CP. Rachel, can you hear me?
I sure can. Hi, Dean.
Hi. Ben, I've got a couple other pension questions, so if you can circle back to me after this. I have two off the top on the session. With the, you've seen the broad strokes of what's coming on the pension bill. What's your caucus going to do about it? Are we going to see a filibuster here?
Listen, we are going to do everything at our disposal to stop every single solitary step towards Danielle Smith getting her hands onto the pensions and the retirement security of the millions of Albertans who have worked their whole life to create their retirement security, the vast, vast majority of whom are very disturbed about the prospect of the UCP's plans. In my view, up to this point, the UCP has engaged in an incredibly dishonest conversation with Albertans about the plans that they have. They've been spreading misinformation. They've been spending taxpayer dollars to campaign to them, to persuade them, using facts which are not real. So as a result, we simply can't trust them on the issue of a referendum. I can't even begin to imagine the question, Dean, that they would construct in a referendum. But I highly doubt that anybody believes that they can trust them to administer such a process fairly. So any steps to jeopardize the retirement security of Albertans will be resisted with all of our efforts here in Alberta's NDP official opposition.
Go ahead, Dean.
And what about, so the dynamic changes a bit next week. You've got lots of members, more than you've ever had before, on the opposition side. And, things were a little testy on the way out in the spring. What do you expect is going to come in terms of logistical changes, members, tone? What are you expecting in the next few weeks?
Well, we're going to come into it with a view to trying to make things work. We've just talked, for instance, about the emergency motion that we've just given notice to the Speaker about, and I think, that's an opportunity for us to actually have unanimity in the House is one of the first things that we do when we return. And so that's positive. But for sure, we're going to have some pretty significant debates if some of the things that we have heard about come forward. I mean, obviously, we have an obligation to look at the bills, to look at the substance of what they're proposing before we, announce a strategy, because, that's our job, is to read what they're presenting and respond to it fairly. And we have a very measured and seasoned and respected House leader here who is going to be giving us excellent advice on how to move forward on these things. Did you want to say anything?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Keep going, Dean.
Oh, thanks. Okay, so I have a couple of follow-up questions for you on the pension. So now we're going to go to the court. It sounds like we're going to court from the premiers anyway. We want a hard number, either negotiated or adjudicated. So I guess that raises the question, why didn't we get that to start with? Or did we need that to start with?
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think? I mean, has the government done its due diligence here?
Listen, the government has been misleading Albertans about the costs and benefits with respect to this scheme to get Alberta's pensions, retirement, savings into the hands of this provincial UCP government. They've been misleading people all over the place. And yesterday's statement about going into court to get a number is just yet another version of what is an ever-changing set of arguments coming from a government that is scrambling to persuade at the expense of the truth. The reality is that we do not have a hard number. We do not know whether this will cost a lot or maybe just a little, or create massive risk, or create only a little bit of risk, or conversely, whether every Albertan will get a pink pony in their yard the day after it happens. But the reality is that we've got a government that seems to be campaigning on the pink pony line. And it's disrespectful to taxpayers, and it is disrespectful to citizens, and it should stop.
Got time for one more, Dean.
Oh, come on. Okay, so then what's the point, or is there still a point, to public these town halls on your side and on the government side? Because the government now admits that the number that this is all based on could be a fluid number. So do we maybe we have town halls based on 3 scenarios, the 16% from the CPP, we use the TOOM number, and then we use 53. I mean, as the Premier said, everything flows from this big number. So
right.
My convoluted question is, what's the point to having town halls when we can't even agree on the Fountainhead number?
Well, the point of us having town halls is to counter the misinformation coming from the $7 or $8 million advertising campaign that's out there claiming that Albertans will get premium reductions, benefit increases, and more economic growth. So those claims are out there. We've spent millions and millions of dollars to tell Albertans something that the Premier is now admitting is not certain. So unfortunately, unless they then spend another $7 million to say, oops, please ignore what we just spent $7 million telling you, we are, as the official opposition, bound to go out and do everything we can to make sure that Albertans get the real information. And that real information is that number is unreliable, and that there is more likelihood of risk to security, as well as the amount of premiums and the size of benefits. Meanwhile, what we are also doing, which the UCP is not doing, is we are asking a simple question of Albertans. And that simple question is, do you want to stay in CPP or not? And so I think that that is also valuable because it allows us to go in with great credibility to the legislature to say, hey, every 2 or 3 days, the numbers of people who have responded to our survey has gone up. And guess what? We actually have over 35,000 people, 90% of whom say, keep your hands off our pension. So that's why we're doing it. Why they're doing it, I don't know. It is actually, I mean, we have made complaints to the Ombudsman. We are making complaints to the Auditor General. I mean, this is a gross abuse of public dollars right now. And the Premier herself has now admitted that that number can't be relied on. Yet we've spent millions of dollars telling people they can. And so they have a lot to answer for.
And that's all for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.